She doesn't look like much. That's the first thing people say when they see a photograph of the real Annabelle doll. Not that's terrifying. Not I can't believe that thing is real. The first thing people say, almost universally, is some version of, that's it? Because she is a Raggedy Ann doll. Red yarn hair, friendly stitched smile. The kind of doll your grandmother might have kept on a shelf. She was mass-produced, sold in toy stores, given as birthday gifts by mothers who just wanted to make their daughters happy. She is the very definition of ordinary. And yet, she sits in a locked glass case in Monroe, Connecticut. On the case, in bold capital letters, positively do not open. Priests come to bless her regularly, not to perform some quick, perfunctory prayer, but to actually bless her, with intention and with the specific purpose of keeping whatever is inside that glass case from getting out. The warning sign has been there for decades. The case was custom built. And before it was built, before they figured out what to do with her, the people who brought her home say she levitated off their desk, appeared in different rooms of their house, and contributed to the near-death of at least 3 different people. All of that, allegedly, from a cloth doll with a stitched-on smile. This is Shadow, and welcome back to my channel. Enjoy and hit the like and the subscribe button. Let's get into it. Before we get into the case itself, I want to name something clearly, because it's going to be a thread running through everything we discuss tonight. The Annabelle story is more than 50 years old. It started in 1970, and it keeps spreading, keeps finding new audiences, keeps frightening people who have never heard of the Warrens, who stumbled across a photograph online and felt something cold move through them. Why does that happen? I think it comes down to something very specific. The Annabelle story is not about a monster. It is not about something obviously evil doing obviously evil things. It is a story about something ordinary that shouldn't be able to move, moving. We are, as a species, deeply unsettled by wrongness. Not danger exactly, danger we can identify, respond to. What unsettles us at a primal level is when the rules stop working. When something that should be inert is not inert. When something with no eyes appears to be watching you. When something with no will appears to have a purpose. A Raggedy Ann doll appearing in different rooms while no one is home. Notes on parchment paper that nobody put there. A doll's soft cloth arms rising onto a table by themselves. None of these things are spectacular. None of them would survive as a main set piece in a horror film. They'd be replaced with something more cinematic. But in a real apartment in 1970, experienced by real people who had no reason to lie, they are terrifying. And that is the central argument of this video. Not because more things happen, but because fewer things happen, and those few things feel completely, horribly real. Every story about Annabelle eventually leads back to 2 people, Edward Warren Miney and Lorraine Rita Moran. Without them, there is no museum. Without them, there is no preserved case file. Without them, there is almost certainly no Hollywood franchise. And without them, the Annabelle doll is just a nursing student's Raggedy Ann that behaved strangely for a while. Ed Warren was born on September 7, 1926, in Bridgeport, Connecticut. He grew up in what he later described as a haunted house, a claim that became part of his origin story and that we have to take on faith, since no independent verification exists. What's documented is that he was not formally trained in any field connected to his eventual career. No seminary, no degree in theology or psychology. He called himself a demonologist, a title he gave himself through decades of self-study in Catholic literature, personal investigation, and an unshakable personal certainty that the world contained forces most people preferred not to examine directly. Lorraine Moran was born on January 31, 1927, also in Bridgeport. She claimed from childhood that she could see auras, colored light surrounding people, shifting depending on their emotional and spiritual state. She kept this to herself for years, afraid of what her parents would think. By every account, she was a woman of profound personal faith who believed with absolute sincerity in everything she said publicly about the cases she worked on. They met as teenagers at a movie theater in Bridgeport where Ed worked. They married in 1945. They were, by all accounts, deeply in love for the entirety of their lives together. And whatever you think of their work, that part is real. Their path into paranormal investigation began in the early 1950s in an unusual and almost poetic way. Ed was working as an artist. He had genuine talent, and he would go on to paint hundreds of pieces depicting haunted locations, supernatural encounters, and scenes from the cases he and Lorraine investigated throughout their careers. In those early years, He discovered he could use his paintings of purportedly haunted houses as an opening gambit. He'd paint the exterior of a supposedly haunted location, knock on the door, and offer to show the owners his work. This gave him entry into homes across New England, entry into conversations about strange occurrences, and access to a world of stories that fascinated him completely. He and Lorraine spent roughly 5 years traveling the country this way, Ed painting, both of them listening. Lorraine was skeptical at first, not of the supernatural generally, she believed in that from childhood, but skeptical that all the stories they heard were genuine, that all these reported hauntings were real. But something shifted as the miles accumulated. We would be in vastly different places, she said later. 1 week in Iowa and 1 week in Texas, but there was often a similarity, even an exactness, to the stories these people would tell. The patterns convinced her. People who had never met, in entirely different parts of the country, described the same kinds of experiences, the same progression of events, the same types of objects being affected, the same feeling of something that was not a human ghost but something older, colder, more purposeful. In 1952, they founded the New England Society for Psychic Research, the NESPR, which they described as the oldest ghost hunting organization in New England. Over the following decades, they claimed to have investigated more than 10,000 cases of alleged paranormal activity. They built a genuine reputation within paranormal circles, cultivated a network of priests, police officers, and medical professionals who took them seriously enough to cooperate with them, wrote books, gave lectures, and eventually became, after their involvement in the Amityville horror case in 1976, household names across America. The Warrens are complicated figures, and intellectual honesty requires saying so clearly. There is a flattering version of them. Two deeply faithful Catholics who dedicated their lives to helping people in terror, people whose experiences had left them frightened and isolated, who had nowhere else to turn. They asked for little in return. They came when called. They brought structure and meaning to experiences that felt incomprehensible. They were, in their way, chaplains to the inexplicably haunted. There is a less flattering version. Charismatic storytellers who recognized a gap in the market, a public hunger for supernatural stories told with authority, and positioned themselves expertly to fill it. Ed had no formal credentials. His claim of being recognized by the Catholic Church as a lay demonologist is disputed. The Church does not, as a general matter, formally recognize lay demonologists, and the specific claim about Ed has been challenged without conclusive resolution. Lorraine's clairvoyance was, by definition, unverifiable. Their stories changed across different tellings. Their cases became book deals and lecture tours and, eventually, very profitable film rights. The truth almost certainly lives in the complicated middle. What we can say with reasonable confidence is that they believed in what they were doing. Lorraine in particular never showed any sign of cynicism or performance. She spoke about her clairvoyant experiences with the same matter-of-fact certainty whether she was talking to a journalist, a priest, or a nursing student with a frightening doll. Ed was charismatic and was clearly a natural storyteller, but storytelling skill and sincerity are not mutually exclusive. Whether sincere belief is sufficient justification for the apparatus they built around it is a question I'll leave with you. What matters for our purposes is that when they answered a call about a Raggedy Ann doll in Hartford, Connecticut in 1970, they were walking in with a fully formed theological framework, one that would shape everything they observed, everything they reported, and everything that came afterward. It begins, as so many disturbing things do, with a gift. But before we get to the gift itself, it's worth spending a moment with the world this story was born into. Because context matters enormously when we're trying to understand why a particular story takes hold the way this one did. 1970 is a fascinating and turbulent year to be young in America. The Vietnam War is consuming society at the molecular level, dividing families, reshaping what Americans believe about their country and its institutions. The generation that came of age in the 1960s has watched Kennedy get shot, then King, then Kennedy again. The counterculture is at its peak and already beginning to fray. The Manson murders happened in August of 1969, just months before this story begins, and they have cast a long shadow, this sense that something dark and irrational is lurking underneath the surface of American life, that the flower power idealism of the late 60s had a shadow self capable of terrible things. Into this climate of uncertainty and cultural vertigo, the paranormal becomes enormously significant. The early 1970s are a remarkable period for American interest in the supernatural. Books about the occult are bestsellers. Films like Rosemary's Baby, 1968, and The Exorcist, 1973, don't emerge from nowhere. They emerge from a culture genuinely preoccupied with questions of evil, of demonic forces, of whether the things human beings have always feared in the dark might actually be real. The Catholic Church itself lends institutional weight to this. The rite of exorcism is a living document in 1970. Priests who believe in demonic possession are not fringe figures. They are operating within an orthodox religious tradition that has maintained, for centuries, that demons are real and can affect human lives. The nursing student who receives a Raggedy Ann doll in 1970 is not living in our secular, post-internet world where a story like this would be immediately dissected by skeptics online. She is living in a world where the supernatural is taken seriously by mainstream institutions, where a woman in genuine distress about something inexplicable happening in her apartment has limited options. There was no ghost hunter YouTube channel, no paranormal investigation app, no easily accessible community of skeptics who could offer comforting rational explanations. She had a priest, she had a phone book, and she had her own terrified senses telling her something was deeply, fundamentally wrong. A nursing student named Donna receives a Raggedy Ann doll from her mother for her birthday. She's 28 years old, sharing an apartment in Hartford with her roommate Angie. They are both training nurses, sensible, practical, educated in one of the most demanding professions in existence. Not fanciful, not prone to drama. Exactly the kind of people this story should not have happened to. The doll gets placed on Donna's bed, and for a while, nothing happens. Then, small things, strange things. Donna would leave the doll on the couch and come home to find it sitting in her bedroom. She'd leave its legs straight and come back to find them crossed. The changes were small enough at first to dismiss as misremembering. She was stressed. She was busy. She hadn't looked carefully. But then the differences became harder to explain away. The doll on the floor when she'd left it on a shelf. The doll in her locked bedroom when she'd left it in the living room. And then, the moment that crossed the line from unsettling to impossible, the doll kneeling. Actually kneeling, in the center of the living room floor, in a position that cloth and stuffing simply cannot maintain without support. Donna tried to recreate it. She positioned the doll carefully, balanced it, stepped back. It fell over, every time. The Raggedy Ann doll did not have the structural integrity to maintain an unsupported kneeling position. And yet, then came the notes. Scraps of parchment paper, scattered around the apartment. Handwriting that looked childlike, like a young person still learning to form letters. The messages were simple. Help us. Help Lou. But there was something about that plural pronoun, that us, as if more than one thing was asking, that Donna found persistently, horribly unsettling. She and Angie searched the apartment thoroughly. They had no parchment paper. Not in drawers, not in cabinets, not in closets. The notes appeared on a material they didn't own, in handwriting that resembled neither of theirs. Around this time, drops of what appeared to be blood were found on the doll's cloth hands. Not a dramatic amount, just drops. But the doll was cloth and stuffing. It had no interior that could produce liquid. No biological processes. It was, incontrovertibly, an inanimate object. And yet, the most disturbing incident involved not Donna or Angie, but their friend Lulu had been suspicious of the doll from the beginning. He couldn't articulate exactly why, just that something about it felt wrong. He'd told the girls more than once. They'd largely dismissed his concerns. And then Lou started having the nightmares. He dreamed about the doll in his bed. He was paralyzed, completely unable to move, while the doll climbed slowly up along his legs, its cloth arms moving in ways cloth arms should not move, climbing toward his chest and then to his neck, where the soft cotton hands would close around his throat. He would wake gasping, heart pounding, certain that something terrible was happening. He told Donna. He was shaken in a way that his skepticism had not prepared him for. Then, one night when Lou and Angie were alone in the apartment, they heard a noise from Donna's room. Lou went to check. The room was empty, except for the doll in the corner, which was not where he remembered it being. He turned away from the doll, and then he felt it. Something raking across his chest. Deep claw marks, 7 of them, 3 vertical and 4 horizontal, as if something with multiple forward-reaching digits had slashed at him. Angie saw the wounds. They bled, and then, according to the Warren account, they healed. Not over days and weeks. Within approximately 48 hours. Nearly completely gone. This is the moment in the story where I want to pause and sit with the strangeness of it. Because if this happened exactly as described, we are no longer in territory that can be explained by coincidence. or by the imperfect reliability of human memory. Claw marks appearing on a person's body in a room where there is nothing with claws, healing in 48 hours, represent a claim that is either entirely fabricated or represents something genuinely outside the explanatory frameworks most of us use to navigate the world. There is no comfortable middle ground. Either Lou invented this, or something happened in that apartment that we do not have adequate tools to explain. After the attack, Donna did what many people in her situation would do. She went to a psychic medium. The medium told her she had made contact with a spirit, a 7-year-old girl named Annabelle Higgins. The child had died on the property before the apartments were built. She was lonely. She liked Donna and Angie. She just wanted a home. And Donna, who was a nurse, who had chosen as her life's work the care of others, who could not hear about a lonely child who wanted to be loved and not respond, said yes. She gave the spirit permission to inhabit the doll. According to the Warrens, that was the worst mistake she could have made, because there was no Annabelle Higgins. And what she had just invited in was not the ghost of a 7-year-old girl. After Lou's attack, Donna contacted an Episcopalian priest named Father Hagen, who immediately recognized this was beyond his experience and called in his superior, Father Cook. Father Cook, who knew the Warrens by reputation, picked up the phone. Ed and Lorraine arrived at the apartment. They listened. They looked at the doll, and their conclusion was almost immediate. To understand the Warrens' conclusion, you need to understand their theological framework, because it's not improvised. It's the product of centuries of Catholic demonological tradition going back through the Middle Ages all the way to the earliest centuries of Christianity. In that tradition, there is a crucial distinction between human ghosts and demonic entities. Human ghosts, the Warrens believed, are real but fundamentally limited. They cannot physically harm the living, cannot move objects with force, cannot create wounds on a person's body. They are, essentially, passive, troubling sometimes, distressing, but not dangerous in any direct physical sense. Demons are something else entirely. They are not human and have never been human. They are older than humanity. They are, in Orthodox Catholic theological terms, fallen angels, spiritual beings who existed before the creation of humanity, who chose rebellion against the divine, and whose single animating purpose for all of time since that rebellion has been the corruption and eventual possession of human souls. And crucially, this is the element of Warren demonology that is most important for understanding what happened in that Hartford apartment. Demons lie. They do not announce themselves. They do not show their true nature. They are patient, strategic, calculating beings who can apparently study a human target over time and identify the precise vulnerability that will grant them access. They learn what a person fears, what a person loves, what a person cannot resist hearing, and they construct their approach around that knowledge with a precision that, within the Warren framework, is genuinely chilling to contemplate. Catholic demonology also identifies a specific progression through which demonic activity intensifies. It begins with infestation. The demon establishes a presence, causing strange phenomena, objects moving, sounds, an atmosphere that feels subtly wrong. Then oppression. The demon begins directly affecting the human beings present through nightmares, physical attacks, persistent dread. Then, in the most serious cases, obsession and eventually possession. The gradual erosion of a human being's will until the entity can fully inhabit and control them. The Warrens believed they arrived in Hartford at the boundary between infestation and oppression. The moving doll and the notes were infestation. Lou's attack was the beginning of oppression, and what lay ahead, if the exorcism hadn't intervened, was worse. In Donna's case, the demon found a woman whose compassion was her defining characteristic. A woman who had chosen nursing because she wanted to help people in suffering. A woman who could not hear about a lonely dead child and not open her heart. So the demon gave her exactly that story. Ed Warren was unequivocal. There was no Annabelle Higgins. No record of any child by that name dying on or near the property. The medium, sincere but insufficiently experienced, had been manipulated by a demonic entity sophisticated enough to know exactly what her clients needed to hear. The entity manufactured the Annabelle Higgins persona from scratch and used Donna's compassion as the instrument of her own vulnerability. When Donna said yes, you can stay, she unwittingly gave a demon a foothold in her home. Ed made a second crucial distinction that he repeated throughout his career. Demons do not possess objects. Objects have no souls, no will, no interior that a demon can inhabit. What the demon was doing with the Raggedy Ann doll was using it as an anchor, a focal point, a locus of activity that allowed it to manifest, to move the doll, to generate the notes, create the phenomena terrorizing the apartment without revealing its true nature. The doll was a tool. The demon was the craftsperson. And what the craftsperson was building, patiently, methodically, with each escalating incident, was trust, compliance, the eventual surrender of a human soul. It didn't want the doll. It didn't want the apartment. It wanted Donna. Father Cook performed an exorcism, not of the doll, but of the apartment. A formal Catholic rite, performed by an ordained priest with the authority of the church behind him. The individuals present were blessed. And at Donna's express request, the Warrens took the doll with them when they left. Ed placed the doll in a bag. He and Lorraine drove home to Monroe, Connecticut. And then the problems began. Near crashes on the drive home. Brake failures that resolved, according to Lorraine, the moment Ed poured holy water over the bag. When they arrived home, Ed placed the doll on his desk. Within hours, it had moved. Over the following weeks, the doll appeared in different rooms of their house. Then the levitation reports, Ed claiming to come into his study and find the doll floating above his desk, dropping back down as he entered. A Catholic priest came to visit. He was skeptical. He held the doll, dismissed it, drove home. His car brakes failed. He survived the accident. He never dismissed the Annabelle doll again. The Warrens built a locked case. Glass-fronted, specially constructed. They had it blessed. They put the doll inside. They added the warning, positively do not open. And there Annabelle sat, for the better part of 5 decades, in the Warrens Occult Museum in Monroe, Connecticut, in the back of their house on a residential street that looked, from the outside, like any other house on any other residential street in New England. Verification. Donna, Angie, and Lou were never publicly named and never gave independent accounts. Everything we know comes almost entirely from the Warrens, people with significant professional and financial reasons to tell a compelling story. Inconsistency. In The Demonologist, 1980, the doll was a birthday gift and Annabelle Higgins was 7, dying in a field on the property. In archival museum video from the 1980s, Ed says it was a Christmas gift, she was 6, and she died in a car accident. These aren't minor details. The story of Annabelle Higgins is the entire foundation of the case. The broader pattern. The Amityville Horror, the Warrens' most famous case, has been found to contain serious fabrications. It's a fair question whether the same happened here. Science writer Sharon A. Hill put it plainly. Like real-life Ed Warren, real-life Annabelle is actually far less impressive. But the believer's case has weight too. Donna and Angie had no reason to lie and nothing to gain. Lou's claw marks, if witnessed, if genuinely healing in 48 hours, are not explainable by suggestion alone. And the Warrens never once recanted across decades of public challenge, right up to Lorraine's death in 2019. Where does that leave us? In the middle. The only honest position is uncertainty. The case might be real. It might be a story that grew in the telling. It might be both. What's certain is that it changed the world. In 2013, James W. Ann released The Conjuring. The film's 6-minute prologue, 2 nurses describing their Raggedy Ann doll to the Warrens, left audiences barely able to breathe. Not from jump scares, from restraint. You never see the doll move. The nurses describe what it did. That gap between what's described and what's shown is where the fear lives. The Conjuring made $320 million on a $20 million budget. What everyone talked about afterward wasn't the Perron family. It was the doll. Warner Brothers greenlit a standalone Annabelle film almost immediately. Tony Spera quoted Lorraine Warren. "It's not what the doll looks like that makes it scary. It's what has been infused within the doll, evil." He said the real doll is what he'd fear most in the entire museum. Not for how it looks, but for what it represents. Looks are deceiving. He's right, but the real doll's fear requires knowledge and context. The movie doll communicates threat to anyone, instantly, with no prior context. That's the gap between a legend and a cinematic icon. The warning, positively do not open, isn't addressed to whatever is inside. It's addressed to you. There are things you should not open. There are questions whose answers cost more than the comfort of having them. The museum closed in 2019. Zoning violations, not hauntings. In 2025, reports spread that Annabelle had disappeared. It went viral. Tony Spera confirmed it was a marketing campaign for a Warren legacy tour. The doll was never missing. The stunt worked. The legend refreshed itself for another generation. The case still sits somewhere. The priests still come. The warning is still there. Is there anything those blessings actually constrained? Or is it just an old toy in a box? I don't know. I don't think anyone does. What I know is that a nursing student's compassion opened a door in 1970 and it has never fully closed. The story has reached people who weren't born when it happened. The Raggedy Ann has generated more sustained fear than almost any object in modern history, not because of what it is, but because of what it might be. The real story is scarier than the movies, not because more happens, but because it doesn't end. The movies give you credits and daylight. The real story gives you a doll in a box and no answer. Open questions are the scariest things of all. They never let you go. Drop in the comments. Do you believe the real story? Is the Raggedy Ann scarier now than the porcelain doll? And if there's another haunted object or dark history you want covered, let me know. Until next time, stay curious, stay a little afraid.